My name's Gillian Stewart. I'm a bookbinder based in Glasgow, where I run my studio Juju Books, which focuses on creative bookbinding, making books and boxes. I've first encountered bookbinding in art school, where I was studying illustration and printmaking, so I would make books that included my own work, but over time I became much more interested in the making of the books rather than what I was putting in them. And I think what I love about it is that it's creative and very technical, so it ticks those boxes in my brain. Another thing I love is that I'll never know everything. There's so much to it that I'll always be learning something. There'll always be something new for me to learn or to develop, so I'll never be bored. So my training first started in art school, where I did some very simple bookbinding. After that, I managed to get a traineeship in a small bindery, but it wasn't as formal as an apprenticeship, so the education wasn't as rich. And after I left that job, I wanted to learn more, but it was actually really difficult to find a route to learn more about bookbinding. There are currently, as far as I know, no new apprenticeships in the UK. There are some traineeships, but they're hard to find, and there are no full-time courses. A lot of colleges have closed their bindery departments, so if we want to learn how to become a bookbinder to a professional level, it's actually been really difficult to find a route to do that. So I've had to find my own path to bookbinding. What's helped me is being involved with a few different organisations. So I got funding from Quest, so I got a Quest scholarship, Queen Elizabeth Scholarship Trust, and they funded a lot of one-to-one training with bookbinders, mostly in the UK, but also in different parts of Europe, which was fantastic. I also became involved with designer bookbinders who promote and encourage bookbinding within the UK, and I was paired with mentors for that, and they have a lot of fellows that are really encouraging and are very generous with their knowledge. And I've also been involved with the Society of Bookbinders as well, so another UK-based organisation that support makers. As well as opportunities through the Heritage Craft Association and the Printmakers Charity and the Cloth Workers and Craft Scotland, Creative Scotland. There's all sorts of different organisations that have really supported me, and without that I wouldn't have been able to get the education that has allowed me to make books to the level that I do now. I think one of the things that keeps me interested in bookbinding and makes me want to come back to my bench and make work is how process heavy it is, and how elaborate some of those processes are, and how involved they are, and how one tiny step at the start of making a book 4 weeks later will have a knock-on effect. So you really need to be thinking lots of steps ahead about every single thing that you're doing, which is very challenging and takes a lot of practice to get good at those steps. Another great thing about bookbinding is that we use so many different materials and techniques that we kind of borrow from different crafts as well. So a lot of the tools that we use weren't designed for bookbinding. For example, spoke shaves we use for thinning leather, we use cobbler's knives for slitting paper, we use leatherworking tools, gold tools, which keeps it very interesting. And there's a real breadth of materials that we use. So the primary one would be paper, so we need to have a real knowledge of paper, how it works, what qualities it has, from milled paper up to handmade paper. We also need to know about leather, which is very difficult to learn and can be so challenging to work with, but when it behaves, it's beautiful, and it's like nothing else to work with. And when we work with leather, we need to be very careful about how thin it is, to fractions of a millimetre. So we need to know about using knives and sharpening knives. I do a lot of leather dyeing, so I involve dyeing and printmaking processes as well. And then we use gold tooling, so we need to know about working with gold and precious metals. We do painting of book edges. We do lots of intricate sewing with silk on the end bands. Then we need to know about box making and box construction, which gets into a different type of engineering. So we use a real big range of materials and processes, which keeps it interesting. Sustaining my practice is something that I am working on and have learned to manage over time, because I've had to create my own job, because there aren't many jobs where you'll be hired as a bookbinder, in Scotland certainly. So I've had to make my own job, run my own business, which is very tiring, and has led to burnout a few times. So for me, it's been very important to take time out and to just close my books for 2 weeks, or to take a residency somewhere else and just make work just for myself. It's hard to do, it's really difficult, especially financially as a maker and working on my own, but it's something that I've recognised is very important to give me a rest and to refill my creative banks so that I can keep going and keep making. I think there's a few reasons why it's important to still keep making books by hand to a high quality. For clients, they'll get something from a bookbinder, a hand bookbinder that they can't get anywhere else. So if it's a special project they need hand bound or a special box made for something really important, you can't get that in a shop and you might not be able to get a machine to make it for you. So if you need something really special and finely crafted, you need a person to make it. Personally, I think that keeping the craft at this standard and trying to make books as good as I can is important on a human level, because making something well with your hands is a special type of rewarding that you can't really get from anything else. Being good at making books, I feel, has like massively increased my self-esteem and how I think about myself in the world. So it's really tied to me as a person, I think, the things that I make. So in that way, it feels very intrinsic, and that keeps it important that I keep making.